Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night. I'm Rain of Tears, and I posted a video entitled Don't Believe the Hype, Misconceptions about Brazilian Women uh, approximately 2 years ago. And since that time, I've read as well as responded to some of the positive as well as negative commentary and feedback from you, the YouTube audience. So this is my follow-up to my initial YouTube video. Again, don't believe the hype, misconceptions and myths about Brazilian women. And this is the follow-up, part 2. I've become to know and become friends, that being remain in frequent contact to this day with 5 Brazilian women in particular. I know other people, men and women, but these are ones that, as I say, I would classify as friends. 2 of these individuals I had romantic relationships, so I could consider them exes. But we're still friends, the proverbial quote unquote friends, whatever, good relations, keeping frequent contact, etc. And the others were just acquaintances that I met during times when I went there and who gradually became friends as we got to know each other. So what I'm saying is that there was no magic in how I met any of my friends there. They weren't super friendly to me because I was a black American, black American man or anything. None of that, And nor were they super nice or whatever. They were just like, they were them. They had different personalities, a couple are quiet, others were extroverted or whatever, basically just like any place else, and that's how we became friends, just like we would become friends in America or any other place that you go to, Our personalities, our interests meshed, we got to know each other, etc. Now, I would want to add that it did help greatly that all of these individuals that I'm making reference to spoke varying and understood varying degrees of English, and vice versa. I can speak and I spoke and can speak a little bit of Brazilian Portuguese. That helps. I mean, if you can't get around that, especially when you're going to another country that speaks a different language, and the primary language in this particular case in Brazil is Brazilian Portuguese. You have to, as I said in the first one, you have to, there's no way you can get around it. Now, other people on Facebook have stated otherwise, or on YouTube have stated otherwise, but that is not the case. If we're talking about sustaining real relationships, both of you guys have to be able to communicate, whether it's being friends or whatever. There's no way of getting around that. If someone's telling you otherwise, then there's a different agenda, as I also pointed out. If, someone is of a nature other than wanting a romantic relationship, it's a sexual thing, then of course someone's going to be super friendly, but that and just for no strings attached, and just wanting something out of it, of a monetary or gift giving nature, as I said before. And again, you don't have to go 8,000 miles for that. The second component that I want to elaborate on is that in terms of the racial dynamics. There's some serious racial issues and disparities in Brazil, ongoing. And black or Afro-Brazilians particularly, but not just poor Afro-Brazilians, because there are some educated Brazilians, Afro-Brazilians too, that have had issues and face racism and discrimination. They face it on a daily basis. I have to definitely reiterate again that it is not true, despite the hype, that all Brazilians, and particularly those that say this, that are considered white there in Brazil, that they quote unquote, that they don't see color and we're all the same, etc., etc. That is a bunch of malarkey in terms of reality of the situation in Brazil's. Brazil also too, as a country, historically has not been down legally with the whole American concept of the one drop rule makes you black or whatever. And I think everybody pretty much knows not too many countries outside of the United States deal with that in terms of like how a black person is defined or anything, but that's throwing it out there. So in Brazil, there are many categories of who is considered black and people that may be considered black there might not be considered black here, and people that are considered white or Branco in Brazil might not be there. So it's that dynamic too. I think all of us know too that you got to really work hard to maintain and keep a healthy relationship anywhere, whether that be here in the United States, Portugal, any place, obviously. So, with that being said, and that being a given, long distance relationships are that much harder. I mean, believe me, I know, because as I've indicated, I've had them, and I think that people have had them. And we're not even talking about international long distance relationships. I mean, you can have a relationship with a significant other that lives in a different city, like say, or let's use New York, bi-coastal or whatever. I mean, for all the reasons that, contact, etc., that you would think that it would be hard. I mean, it's that much harder when we're talking about an 8,000-mile relationship. So all that I'm saying to say that is that, if we're throwing out that dynamic, let's just say you go down there, you're realistic about it, as I pointed out in my first video as well as this one, and you do meet up with someone that becomes a significant other, your guys' relationship is growing. At some point, if it's at that point, you're going to have to make a decision. Both of you guys are. Are you going to permanently relocate to Brazil, or is your significant other going to relocate to the United States? What about extended family? There's some significant social and cultural differences, obviously, and language differences to a certain extent too. And, the legal requirements, visas and residency requirements, depending on whichever place that you guys ultimately decide to do, United States or Brazil or some other place, those legal requirements, visa and or residency requirements, they're going to come into play. You got to work those things out. And it can be expensive in terms of, like, if you're going to try to maintain the contact before you ultimately decide that you're going to move in one person's country or the other person's country or a third neutral country or whatever, it's a very expensive proposition. So that also comes into play too. It's not just all fun and games or whatever, So that's something also that realistically people have to consider. So just let me conclude by saying that, first of all and foremost, that Brazil definitely has many great, well-known attributes. I would still always highly recommend it as a place to take a vacation. It's a lot of cultural, everything that, that's been discussed at length and you've seen and I've seen, etc. And it's not just for despite the myth, single people go for the reasons that have already been touched upon at length. But, a couple can go too. I mean, I think that could be a very great romantic vacation for a couple. Families too, I mean, you don't have to get involved with the more debaucherous aspects, so to speak. There's things for everybody. It's a very scenic, beautiful, cultural place. And I would say research other locations beyond just Rio, Rio is great. But, the whole country is very diverse and has a lot of points of cultural interest. However, whether it be Brazil, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Jamaica, any other countries in the world, they're not going to address or solve the issues of mistrust, misunderstanding, ill will, all the things that some Black Americans have against, Black American men have against. And again, that's some Black American men. I don't have them, because I'm realistic. I take people for people, whether a woman is a Black American woman here, Afro-Brazilian, a non-Afro-Brazilian woman, just people are people, so to speak. I mean, there's social dynamics in play. You take that in consideration. But even once you get beyond that, a person is still just a human being, etc. I don't need to preach that, and as well as Black American women, some of the Black American women, you guys are at, so to speak, ladies are at fault too, in terms of fostering myths and mistrust against some, if you are, against Black American too. So finally, let me say, there's no Oz. I ain't the wizard. There are no wizards. There is no Oz. It's just us, U.S., as in Black American men and women. So we got to begin to work out our differences, and that's the bottom line, So thank you for listening and viewing. Take care. Peace to all.